So we are joined in studio by Denise Doyle Schnacker, classified employee at the Del Norte Unified School District and a former member of the CSEA Executive Board. Denise, thank you for joining us on this Labor Day to talk about education issues and what's going on related to the struggles for teachers and other employees to be being paid fairly and also to be having appropriate working conditions. So thank you for coming in on this Labor Day.
You're welcome. I had the day off. Thank you, labor movement.
Thank you, labor movement. Yes, that's right.
A lot of brothers and sisters fought for that hard for many years.
And fought and died.
Yes,
so let's be really clear about
exactly.
that. This was not an easy struggle.
Nope.
So before we get into what's going on locally, Denise, I know there are a couple of pieces of legislation at the state level that are happening, and I guess they've been passed by the legislature and are sitting on Governor Newsom's desk. Is that the state of this now?
That's some of them. So there's actually a lot of bills waiting for September 13th. One of them is so AB, let me get to my notes because there are a lot of ABs.
There's always a lot of
There
ABs.
always are. So Assembly Bill 39, so that's to raise funding for LCFF. It basically because the LCFF is
And
the local
for
control funding formula. It's how it's the base funding for schools, and it is factored by the cost of living in different areas of California. That's how we get what we get. And right now that AB 39 is sitting on Newsom's desk waiting for a signature or to go for more research. Another one that's waiting right now is Prop 13. 40 years ago, California had been number 10 in spending, had been above 10 actually, the top 10 states in the United States in education spending. Mm-hmm. We have now fallen, from what I understand from the Institute for Health Metrics out of the University of Washington, we've fallen to 27th. Well, there's our governor says we're 21st, but I think we're most metrics say that we're 27.
Well, and I'm not an educator or consider myself a particularly smart person, but I know that like 27th or 21st is a long way from first.
It's a long way from 10th.
It's a long way from 10th, yes.
Out of 50 states. See, that's the other piece of it.
And this has to do now, this bill you're talking about, with revamping Proposition 13, because so much of the money that used to fund these things came out of property taxes, and Prop 13 axed a lot of that.
Exactly. And the hope is, part of every study around the world shows that when you spend on education and healthcare, those two things in particular, your GDP goes up. So it's not just the health of and welfare of the children receiving that funding, it's the health and welfare of our entire country and economic system. So that's where that one's sitting right now.
So, I know there's at least one other that you want to get to, but just to kind of stay with Prop 13 for a minute, I know that there's a ballot initiative on the slate for the election next year to make some changes in Proposition 13. And sort of the short version of it is that a lot of big businesses took advantage of Proposition 13 when Proposition 13 was really designed to protect private homeowners so they didn't wind up being house rich and then cash poor and then wind up being foreclosed on because of property taxes. And so the Proposition Act, and I think it's the proposition for next year, I want to say it's schools and families first.
It is.
Something
Yes.
like that,
Yeah.
which is going to be designed to make some modifications in Prop
Exactly.
13. So grandma is still protected.
Right.
And at the same time that these big businesses start
Aren't
paying their
able
fair
to,
share.
exactly, aren't able to basically shelter under this loophole of sorts. Yeah, and with that, the hope is once we start funding education at the level it should be funded at, we can start looking at things like the guarantees for mental health support professionals in every school. There is a bill that was withheld. I think it was pulled, I want to say the last week or the week before, that would guarantee that for one healthcare professional for every 600 students. Well, when you look at a rural community like ours, we're already serving above that with the number of healthcare professionals that, the counselors, the counselor techs that we have in our school district. So that's what that got pulled for. Rural counties basically went to the floor and said, yeah, but what about us?
Right. Well, and I mean, I'm thinking particularly of Del Norte, and it certainly isn't only Del Norte, but we have a particularly high need population here due to a lot of factors.
Yeah.
And so you certainly don't want to set some arbitrary state standard that would actually
Harm
cause a
us.
reduction in rural
Exactly.
communities like this, when in reality we need more than what we have.
Right. And really, it would be beautiful if we had an ACEs score for every child, and an adverse childhood score. I've been told that's going to happen soon. I don't, you never know what the timeline is at the state, but if we truly, most of our data is lumped with other counties near us. And I'm sorry to say that, we're all in the same boat, but really and truly, when you look at the data we do have, we are the highest adverse childhood scores in the state.
It never ceases to amaze me, because I've heard that before from a couple of different sources. And then, I remember very clearly Mike McGuire coming here and saying that Del Norte has the highest per capita homeless rate in the state. Per capita, please be clear on that. So, there's just this confluence of issues and poverty and challenges in this community that need to be addressed. Education is one of them, and schools and the employees in those schools obviously play such a central role in taking that kind of multifaceted problem and trying to bring it to some positive resolution. There's one other state bill you wanted to get to.
Yeah. So the other one is the Willful Defiance and Suspensions bill. It's AB 419, and it's taking the school dashboard. The dashboard is on the California Department of Education website. You can go and look at each individual school's scores. Very simple. Green means you're doing good. Yellow means, hey, watch it. Red is, you need, and there's orange as well. Orange, moved into the caution. Red is, you need to fix some things and fast. And right now, the scores for the data that's taken for suspensions for just being defiant, basically disrupting a class to the point where you are suspended. K through 3 is what's you can't suspend for that, really. They would like to see other options, like maybe go see a counselor in the school. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Or some other kind of format for discipline and for teaching behavior. This new bill would make it K-8, that all K-8 cannot be suspended for being, as they say, willfully defiant. So, nope, I'm not going to PE class. Make me. That would not be suspendable under this bill.
And I guess my question is this. On the one hand, I certainly see the need for being able to have control over what's going on in the classroom. So I see that. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, my guess is that, like most things in this country, depending on your economic status and the color of your skin, the rate that you will be suspended for something goes up, and goes up in equal measure, I guess, or maybe in equal measure. So I guess what I'm asking about is, when we're talking about this legislation, from your perspective, what are you thinking needs to be happening? Should we pass this or not pass it? What are you thinking about here?
Well, as it sits right now, Newsom has said that he will sign it with some alterations. I'm not sure what those alterations that he wants to see happen. Personally, I can see this being a positive thing if there are stop gaps put in place. Right. If it's just like anything else, if you make if a mandate comes down to a school, but there's no funding to back it up, we're back at square one.
Right. So there has to be alternatives in place, or else it's just going to be...
Or some funding tied to it. That if your school shows really high rates of suspension, here's some money to mitigate that.
So let me ask a question. You can answer it or not answer it, because I know relatively recently there were a couple of bills that were proposed. I don't know where they stand right now. But the upshot of the bills was to try to get contact with law enforcement out of the lives of these kids as much as possible, with the rationale being, the more that children interact with law enforcement, the more likely they're going to wind up on the school to prison pipeline. Mm-hmm. That's not necessarily true for every kid,
right.
But that's the general premise. And I know our local probation department went to the Board of Supervisors and asked the Board of Supervisors to oppose this legislation. And I know let me say it this way, I believe that the probation department and the school have a contract, if you will, for enforcement of school attendance. This seems to me that this all plays into this willful disobedience, defiance,
right.
Whatever you want to call it, in how do we lessen the possibility of kids getting criminalized for things that probably shouldn't be criminalized. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes, it does. And I've always been concerned about that. In the old days, people would talk about the truancy officer chasing kids through the woods behind Del Norte High and that kind of thing, or showing up at the houses where they would be truant at and be hanging out at after lunch. And there was a stigma with that if you were one of those kids, what other options did you have? And it harmed the relationships of those families with the school. And that's what concerns me. Is it a good thing or a bad thing to have? Okay, let me couch it this way. I know there are officers and probation officers in our community who really, really want to be a helpmate for our community. They want to see kids succeed. They work really hard to mentor, to create relationships. However, those are specific people. If you don't have systems in place or policies written down that say, this is in your job description, you may or may not ABC, those wonderful, beautiful people that are doing that go away, and we're back to pipeline.
Well, and this is a problem that cuts across a number of issues. And since we're talking about the schools, I mean, I will say this. I believe that's one of the huge problems that we face in the Del Norte Unified School District. If you have a relationship with the great teacher or the great classified employee or the great coach or the great janitor or whoever it is, then, cool, you've got that. But if you don't have that, you don't have much.
Right.
Because nothing is systematized. There's all of these really nice sounding programs and all of that. They sound great, but the question is, well, how are they being implemented, and are they being implemented equally?
Equitably, yeah.
Right. And I think the answer to that is no. And are all kids getting equal access to the same type of educational environment?
Right.
And I think the answer to that is clearly no.
Right. And it's interesting because I have friends that, when it comes to the Common Core standards, they're like, oh my goodness, what in the world, we're creating robots. What Common Core did was basically said, we recognize that some schools have a demographics that the rich kids go here. The ones who, not just rich, but the ones who can afford to take your kid to gym class, to take your kid to, to play sports outside of a school district, that kind of thing. You have that funding to basically do that for your child. And there are some schools where the demographics are just the opposite, where you are in destitute poverty, you are working poor, you addiction and mental illness and depression and all of these things are something you're combating. You do not have an equitable distribution of teachers, of opportunities. So Common Core came in and said, every kid by second grade will know this. Every kid by third grade needs to know this. And it systematized math and language arts. Why aren't we doing that with everything? Why aren't we making sure that equity is spread across the district?
Well, those are fantastic questions, and I think we need to ask the right people about why that isn't happening. But and I wanted to say we're joined by Denise Doyle Schnacker. She's a classified employee in the Del Norte Unified School District, also former executive board member of the CSEA union, and we have a call coming in. Let's see if I can make this work. Caller, you're live on the air on KFUG. Hang on just a second. Let's try this.
Hello.
Hi, there you go.
Hey, it's Crystal.
Hi, Crystal. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. You're live on the air with us.
Oh, great. I was just listening in. I really don't listen in too much, but Denise tagged me on a Facebook post, and I thought, well, I'm going to check out what they're talking about.
Well, we need to have Denise tagging you and other people more.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I just was. I was listening to what you guys were talking about systematizing things, which, there's another can of worms that I really struggle with systematizing everything because there's always somebody who has power over that system,
right.
And so that's kind of something I'm not quite bought into, but I understand what Denise is saying about systematizing or doing something differently to look at how we are helping kids socially, emotionally. And other aspects of their lives besides academics. And I also listen to you guys talk about, you say, if a kid has a relationship with certain people in the education system or in any part of our community and they have an in, then it's, that's good for them, but there are a lot of kids who don't. And that's true. It's true, especially, I don't know, it's true for Klamath kids. I'm just going to speak from Klamath because that's where I live. I don't really know the other experiences at other schools. But and I've told the school board this, because we asked for, during the LCAP hearing during the school board, which is probably the worst part of the LCAP process this year. They did a pretty good job. The school board and the district did a pretty good job going out into the communities and getting input. What they didn't do a good job of doing was revealing the decisions they had made about the LCAP and how they were going to spend funding, and then allowing the community to actually give input about those decisions. So that wasn't, and I told them straight up to their faces, like, this is not cool how you're doing this process. I mean, we had 2 committee meetings in Klamath, really good turnout for Klamath, and of course, our school board member, our rep, wasn't there. She's never at our school. And so I looked at her and I said, how do you even know how to vote? And, you know, my oldest son is in 5th grade at Margaret Keating, and when he was in 2nd grade is when I looked at his class, because I volunteer at the school, and I realized that half of his class had experienced the loss of a parent due to trauma. Half of his class. And, you know, we constantly get denied full-time counseling. I don't understand it. And they want to use money and numbers as a way to you know, they say, well, we're spending, you know, $20 more per student in Klamath. Well, that doesn't do anything for these students, because you're not really looking at their needs. You're just looking at them as a number. And I would really like to see our school board representatives be held accountable. If they're representing my school, they better be at my school. They better know my community, and they better listen to the stories of what our families need, and that's not happening right now.
Crystal, let me thank you very much for calling in and sharing all of that with us today.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Keep talking.
We'll do the best
I might
we
call
can.
back.
All right.
Bye.
So, Denise, I want to make sure that we move to labor issues here pretty quickly, but I do want to address what I thought was Crystal's kind of main part of this, and it's the issue of transparency, because I really do. And I know, because I've been there when it's been raised with the superintendent and all of that, you know, that transparency and communication and lack of, you know, are just consistently raised as issues. And it seems that the district keeps falling down on this as a whole. I know there are individual principals that do better, but you know, your quick thoughts on that?
Yeah, so our district is trying to save money and get information to parents. So one of the ways is a peach jar, sending an email to everyone that signed up, every family member that would like to be a part of that, the flyer emails that go out. That's one little piece. And let's be honest, how many of our folks who are living in poverty and month to month deciding whether I have a phone that's accessible to Wi-Fi or whatever, do they really have access to that information? As someone who calls parents, I call all 98 of my families, or, you know, of my students' families the week before school starts. I don't get paid to do that, but it makes when I communicate, it makes a huge difference. And I think there's a fear on the district's part, especially, and teachers, because we're not born to be communicators. We're born to be educators. And there really is a difference. Yes, I can stand in front of a room of kids and teach wonderful things, but that doesn't mean I'm comfortable calling you on the phone and saying, hey, so Johnny did great this week, or Sally really could use some help with reading at home. Can you help her with this? And how much time do teachers get to do that? Well,
and I think that points to the need of having people who are dedicated to, like, family engagement and community engagement. And I think, you know, that the issue of reaching out to parents, you know, directly about their children, that's one part of it. There's also the part of it, you know, like, I mean, I haven't looked at the district's website lately, but I know that there were times, you know, it's like, well, it's on the website. Well, where is it on the website? Where? You know, well, if you follow this, you know, digital rabbit hole,
right,
you know, down 17 pages or so, then
6 clicks in.
6 clicks in, there it is, when it, you know, in my opinion, it should be like, you know, 1 click.
Right.
But, you know,
well,
that's
and I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. There is a ton of information that the district needs to share with the community by law. You
Right.
know, the SAPs, the school accountability reports, the with our unions, we have to show, you know, that has to be published. The meeting times for board meetings, menus has to be distributed. So yes, there is a ton of information that needs to come out, and parents don't necessarily know what information they need to be getting. So that goes a little bit on the part of families. Educate yourselves a little bit. You know, as a parent, when I was a young parent, 21 and 22, I had my children, and I had no clue what I didn't know until I started volunteering in the school. And luckily, my children were both at a school that they welcomed. They had a system in place to put me to work as a volunteer, with or without any skills. And I think that's something that's missing.
Well, and I think that is, and I think that is a huge topic that we could easily spend the rest of this program on, because, you know, I think, you know, we can go into, well, the people who need the outreach the most are the people who have the hardest time.
Exactly.
And so I
how
think,
do you mitigate that?
well, and I think the thing is, for me, right, I always look at, well, who has the power in this relationship,
Yep.
right?
It's on the district to do the first reach.
Right,
honestly.
because, I mean, you know, who has the power, who has the resources, who has the time, and you know, it's like, well, if I've got all the power in the relationship, you know, then it's kind of on me to like be the one who puts more effort into it. I can't say to the person who has no power in the relationship, you do it all.
Good point.
Yeah. So go ahead, real quickly.
But as a family member, I feel it's, if I want what's best for my children, I have to do a little bit too. I have to be willing and open to receive whatever information they're giving me.
I agree, and you also have to you have to
And
know what you
advocate.
don't know, though.
Yes,
and if
and
you don't know how to do that stuff, or that you even can, you know, so it starts getting
and
into
whose
this.
job is that to teach? I think it's the district's job to teach. We teach holistically. That's our job, to teach parents how to access the webpage, how to get the information they need to from CDE, how to advocate for their child.
Well, we should be doing that.
Yes, yes.
We're talking with Denise Doyle Schnacker. You are tuned to KFUG Crescent City. This is Public Process. I'm Mike Thornton, 11:36 on this Monday morning, Labor Day. So, Denise, let's talk about labor issues, because there are a number of things going on related to teachers, perhaps other employees, struggling for just compensation, working conditions, benefits, those kinds of things. It's happening nationally. It's happening here locally. What's your picture of what's going on, and how it is affecting the people who we're asking to do these incredibly important jobs, which is, you know, kind of not only like physically take care of our kids for a good portion of every day, but
to
also
12
but also to help them become, you know, well-educated, fully rounded human beings.
Yeah. So, wow, we are living in some pretty precarious times economically. So I don't remember when, I want to say last May, a story came out from the LA Times that said we are headed to a recession in America, and California is going to get hit. And I think there was a big gather the wagons, we need to be prepared, and let's share some of that fear. So the district has, you know, we received our 3% cost of living increase as part of the LCFF. That was what the intention of the state was, to send that extra funding.
But
yes.
the intention of the state was to send more than that, though.
It was originally, yes.
Okay.
But they sent us 3%, which is what it is. The district.
Well, but who made the decision?
negotiations-
Who made the decision for it to only be 3%? Because I thought that the state authorized more than that. Am I right?
Oh, that's a good question.
Not
from what I had heard.
Oh, okay.
It may have been.
I might have
been. I'm not
misunderstood
sure.
that.
I might
Okay.
have as well.
Okay.
But we got a 3% increase, a COLA from the state. teachers go into negotiations, and as it stands right now, publicly, what was shared was that teachers were offered 1% 6 months ago, came back to the table again, offered 1%, came back again, 1%.
Okay, so maybe this is where I got confused.
Okay.
So the state authorized 3%.
Right.
But the teachers are only being offered 1%.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And whose decision is it to offer 1%?
The district, the negotiating team for the Del Norte Unified School District.
So 3% was authorized by the state. The district is choosing to only offer 1%.
Right. And what has been shared publicly is that decision was based on in anticipation of ongoing recession and possible, going into a full-blown, we're all out of money, that we needed to hold some money just in case, that rainy day fund. The state actually mandates that every LEA, local educational, I can't remember what the A stands. I want to say authority, that they hold a percentage of all funds that come in regardless in case of it's a rainy day fund. The district's choosing to go above and beyond what the state is mandating in anticipation of what they say is recessions coming. We can, you can always just guess what may happen tomorrow, the next day. My personal experience was in 2007, 8, 9, when we did go through another hard hit across the nation for funding for education. Our district was well poised because our fiscal director at the time did have a large amount of money set aside in case of whatever happening. We didn't lose quite as many teachers as was anticipated. I think, as always, fear is not a good partner when you're making pragmatic decisions. And that's what is happening now, is a lot of fear is being pushed.
And at least my understanding is that really the negotiations between the teachers union and the district have really been at a stalemate for the last 6 months or so. It sounds like perhaps around this 3%, 1% issue. Go ahead.
Well, and okay, so I just left my school to come over here, and there were 3 teachers on campus on Labor Day for free, prepping for tomorrow. Do they deserve more? Yes.
Oh, I think anybody who's,
I don't think there's an argument about that. And yes, there needs to be a really strong look at our budget line by line with everyone, again, that transparency issue, with everyone at the table, everyone taking a look at where are we? What can be, can we buy more paper, or do we keep asking parents to send paper?
Well, and that leads me to another question. Let me remind the listeners that the numbers in the studio are 460-6100. This is KFUG's Public Process. I'm Mike Thornton, 1142 on this Monday, Labor Day. So Denise, let me ask you this, okay? We always hear and see in the media about teachers having to spend money out of their own pockets in order to provide needed supplies for their students in the public school system. Let me ask you, is that a true thing? First off.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I figured it was.
Thousands, Mike.
Right. I figured it was. I just want, because here's where I'm trying to get to. So, on the one hand, a 3% raise was offered, 1% was authorized, 1% was offered. Contracts are at a standstill, negotiations are at a standstill. Teachers are coming in on their holiday. They're not being paid for it. They are being allowed, if not asked, to provide supplies and materials that I don't think anyone would argue should be part of the deal. You know what I mean? That
Right.
why should and there was an issue about a change in reimbursement. That this was, I think, last year, where teachers had put out money for field trips or something, and then there was going to be a change in that, and they weren't going to get reimbursed, something to that effect. Did that?
The only thing that I know of a change as far as reimbursement is the time period that I believe we're down to 30 days or within 30 days or 60 days of purchase. It has to something about less than $200. There are a lot of rules around that piece.
Okay. But teachers
I would like to point out, so the state says that we cannot charge parents for paper, pencils, for the basics. The problem is we can't do the fun stuff, the engaging stuff like field trips, science projects that are a little more involved, that kind of thing, without these extra materials. And, they say extra, but in this day and age, hands-on, engaging education needs materials. We need to be able to take kids off campus. We need to, and transportation costs have gone up considerably depending on where you want to take your students. Understandably, I mean, the gas prices have skyrocketed.
Sure. I'm just trying to wrap my mind around all of this, because here's the way I'm interpreting it, right? Is teachers are being asked to do all of this stuff, including, begging parents to provide things,
running a GoFundMe
thing with parents who are struggling to put food on their table, to get them to provide materials that legally they're not able to require the parents to provide. Right. And then it's like, well, do I beg for paper
from students that I know really can't afford it?
Right. In order to have money to do a field project or something like that might actually teach them something. And then at the same time, and this is me saying this isn't Denise saying it, like the district is cheaping out on my wages by offering me a third of what is being authorized. And I mean, after a while, it's kind of like, WTF, man, right? Okay. And so that leads me, it's 11:46, right? Okay. So it leads me to this. Negotiations have been stymied now for
a while.
6 months, it sounds like, from what I hear, right? Okay. And I realize you do not speak for the
Correct.
union. I just want to be really upfront about that. I mean, when do teachers, as we've seen in other communities, right? Very high profile.
Look at Oklahoma.
Just say, you know what? That's it.
We're done.
We're done.
I can't.
We're on strike.
Yeah.
I mean, you, as a person who has their finger on the pulse of a lot of things in the community, do you have thoughts on that?
I do. I think so. As always, things start at the national level. If education, if money doesn't trickle back into our state, if our tax dollars that we send to Washington, D.C. don't come back to us, or even if they do come back to us, to the state, and then the state doesn't necessarily send it out to the people who are doing the work, that's a problem. That means people need to be calling their representatives, calling their senators, helping make those decisions. And then the other piece of that is, showing up at school board meetings. If you truly believe that teachers and educators, because, it's hard being a behavior assistant. If you are helping a child navigate classrooms and they are nonverbal or wheelchair bound or any of these things, that's a hard job. And if you don't have what you need, or you don't feel secure in your job, if you are lots of fear coming down from the board, from intentional or not, I don't, no nefarious things. I really don't think that the intention of the school board is to scare staff into doing their job. I would hope. But that's kind of what's happening.
You would hope?
I would hope.
Okay.
But that means when there are two people at a school board meeting pretty consistently out of thousands of families in our district, that's an issue.
Well, let me ask this question, because I agree with you, and you and I have had similar discussions about not just school boards, but city councils,
Right.
boards of supervisors. Invariably, it is the same people who show up all the time, saying the same things all the time from the public.
Right.
And then everybody else who's there is there because they're being paid to be there.
Right.
Right? Okay. And these meetings are invariably held at times that make it difficult for regular folks to be there.
I was told that school board meetings will be televised. I was told that is going to happen this year.
Well, that's been supposed to happen for quite some time,
for
right?
5 or 6 years.
Yes.
That means, okay, so that was said in public on record. That means people now need to show up or send an email, call, and say, when is it going to be televised?
Right. And
So
yes,
that's one part.
Yes, and I agree with that. Okay, but here's my pushback on
Okay.
it. Okay, that at the same time, the school board and other governing boards are particularly opaque about what is happening at a given meeting. It's one of the things that's incredibly difficult to know what's going to be coming up. I mean, unless you're somebody who has the expertise and the time to be able to research all of that stuff, you know where to look, you know what it means, you know where to, what's
point.
going on in the consent calendar and all kinds of things like that. So here's my point, right? If the teachers are getting screwed over, okay?
Right.
And I'm going to say that the teachers are getting screwed over in general.
Agreed.
Not particularly related to the 3%, 1%. That's another issue. When is it the responsibility of the teachers to get out and educate the public about what's happening and what's not happening in the school system, so the public has enough information that
To
if they
support
want
them.
to, they could actually say, you know what, I'm going to come stand with you.
Yeah. And I think that's happening now. The fact that the petition that I cannot remember who, I want to say a parent, started is it. I think they've had double the number of petition signatures that they needed. So yes, I think that's happening, but just depending on Facebook is not going to be enough anymore. It means that you need to talk to your neighbors, talk to people talk to your teacher. If you have a child in education anywhere, ask them, how can I help you? Because yes, those parents who have the opportunities to be picking their kid up, to do all of that, we need to do it for all the children, for everyone, and teachers and classified, everyone involved. So.
And I'm going to suggest, and I think I could probably you know what? I can make a firm offer, at least through this next month, okay? I publicly invite the head of the local teachers union and the superintendent of schools here in Down North to come on this program. We can dedicate the entire 2 hours, if you'd like, to talk about these issues, the challenges that administration has, the challenges that teachers have, the issues around budgets, what we want to be doing for our kids, what role the community can play. I will be happy to dedicate a 2-hour block of this show to do that and take phone calls from the community so people can ask direct questions. So that offer's on the table. Head of the teachers union, superintendent of the schools, You're invited to come on public process. We'll give you 2 hours to talk this stuff all out and take calls from the community.
And be transparent.
And be transparent, absolutely.
Because we don't know what we don't know. Maybe I'm confused. If that's the case, educate me.
Well, no, I mean, and that's the thing is if people don't have, I mean, I've had this conversation with Superintendent Harris. It's difficult. I mean,
Yep.
what the superintendent and administrative office is tasked to do is challenging.
Yes.
There is no doubt about it. And I think the thing is that, and I have said this as well, people don't know. And so then they're like mad at you. And it's like, well, if we say anything, they'll be mad at us. They're already mad at you. The thing is, they're mad at you about stuff that might not be.
Well, and Crystal had mentioned the LCAP meetings in Klamath. I had parents come up to me after that I just know in the community that came up and said, that was the first time anybody ever talked to me and educated me. And I felt like they listened to me. That's huge. They are now proponents of our school district. One of them was not so much. She wanted to pull her kid and homeschool. If she would have had that opportunity to do that, she would have. And, don't be afraid of each other.
Well, it sort of gets back to that whole perpetuating fear kind of thing. So it's 11:55. Denise, let me ask you if you have any final thoughts for our listening audience today.
Go find a 3 by 23 initiative. We have 4 years to make sure that every third grade student in our district is reading at grade level by 2023. Read to your children. I don't care if they're in junior high. Get involved where you can. If a school holds an open house that is an informational night, a safety night, a math night, how you can work with your kids on math, do it. It will serve you as much as your child, as much as the district. Be a partner. And I think that's all I got.
And I will add to that remember that every public employee from, the janitor to the superintendent of schools, to the mayor, to the sheriff, to the county board of supervisors, they work for you. They work for you. And so keep that in mind because they are your employees. You are paying their salary. Denise Doyle Schnacker, classified employee in the Del Norte Unified School District, and also past member of the CSE Executive Board. Thank you for coming in on this Labor Day and joining us to talk about labor and education issues here in our community.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
I really appreciate you being with us.